necessary thing in my life. I don't know about your life, but I'd say it's a necessary thing in all of our lives. I can remember 2003 going into Iraq, going into Baghdad, and seeing people who were surrounded by other religions. But those people standing strong because they had found someone to place their hope in. And against all odds, they opened their churches, and we found the Baptist church in Baghdad, which we thought we were going to plant, was already thriving, meeting every night. And people were coming in. And the evidence of that hope was changed lives. What is it that you can speak into somebody's life and somebody's heart, and it so drastically changes them in every way, that they will stand firm no matter what the landscape looks like, no matter what the persecution is, no matter what the circumstances they find themselves in. And that's what we found. We found a people who had hope. They had hope in a person, Jesus Christ. And because of that, they stood against all odds in that country. 1991, had the opportunity to be one of the first teams going into Moscow. We were a part of a team that did an evangelistic outreach into Kremlin. Every night we had about 5,000 people who crammed that place and stood outside in a communist nation because they needed something. They needed someone. And that someone was Christ. And it was amazing. I remember the first night that the evangelist preached. He gave the invitation, and everyone in the place stood up. And he kind of looked perplexed, and he said, "No, you don't understand. Sit back down again." And he gave the invitation again about what it involved. He's asking you to place your faith and hope and trust in a person, Jesus Christ. And if you do that, you're going to give yourself away. You're going to surrender your life to His life. And He will be preeminent in your life. And your life doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to Him, because you're going to trust Him by faith. That He will intersect your life, that He will touch your life, that He will fill you, that He will walk with you, that He will be your all in all. And He gave that invitation again. Everybody stood up again. And it happened like that every night. 25,000 people putting their faith and trust in Christ. And over again, you see the evidence of the resurrection in changed lives. We went into Romania. The wall had just come down there. Ceausescu was a dictator, a ruthless, selfish dictator. And he had a strong hand, hard hand upon his people, ruled with an iron fist. We went into Timisoara, where the revolution started to overthrow Ceausescu. We saw the church there that when the fighting broke out, the parents told their children, they told them to run to the church there. And as they ran to the church, they found the doors of the church locked under Ceausescu's reign. And the soldiers in all this fighting did not discriminate, but they just began to cut those children down on the steps of the church and anybody else that they could find. But one man stood firm, a pastor. He barricaded himself in his house and he began to preach from his window, telling people, trust Christ, believe Him. And the soldiers came, and they burst through the door and they drug him out. And he preached all the way down the street as they were dragging him. And from that moment, that instant, freedom came to Romania. because one man had hope, because one man believed, because one man's life was changed. And he spoke that word of hope, and people heard it, and the entire nation was changed. That's what the resurrection is about, folks. It's about hope. It's about power. It's about change. And you've seen people. You've seen people change. We tell you about my brother-in-law, an alcoholic most of his life, and then suddenly find Christ, and he is completely and utterly changed. He doesn't even go to AA meeting. He just stops all the addictions he had previously and steps into Christ and begins serving Him until the day he died. It's about changed lives. That's the evidence of the resurrection. And it's about truth. Either we have the truth or we don't have the truth. Now, some of you are going to misunderstand this, but I'm just going to say it anyway, okay? Even if it's not true, we're having a good time, amen? But we're having a good time because it is true. Amen. And I can stand you up here individually. You can begin to tell about how Christ has changed your heart, how He's changed your life, and tell other stories. But you see, that's why He's come. We've been talking about the story. We are now entering the last phase of that, the book of Revelation. And in the book of Revelation, we find God's plan still at work. And really, it's a story written for those who are under great persecution, just like those in Iraq and Russia and Romania and other places. And I'll tell you a story, if I remember it, about India here, as we get into the message here in a few minutes. But it's about hope. It's about God speaking to the life of His people when there seemed to be no hope, when the powers that be seemed to be completely in charge, and nothing would ever change. And Revelation was written to those people so that they would understand God's eternal power and God's watch care and plan for them. And so that's what the book of Revelation is all about. And as we delve into it this morning for a short period of time, I want you to remember that we're going to, as we think about the resurrection, as we think about the person of the resurrection, I want us to think about who this Christ is and how He has intersected our lives and intersected history itself. And God has come even though we did not want Him. We wanted to be our own man, our own people, go our own way, do whatever we want to do. We don't like to be under authority, and we don't like to be under other people's control. And so we refused God and who He was in the Garden of Eden. We've gone our own way. And now people ask the question, well, why does this happen to me? Why does that happen to me? And how come God does not change things? How come God could, and we've seen this in these last days, we've lost people here in this place. We've lost Jack. God could have healed him. He could be sitting here today. And we ask the question, well, why didn't God just heal him? Isn't God a good God? Doesn't God care? And we have a young couple sitting here who lost a child. We can nowhere come close to understanding that. When you think that the joy, when you think the provision, when you think the nurture, the encouragement, the help, the love that child would have experienced. And we ask God that question, God, why? When so many are not wanted, why this child? Why us? And we are full of questions about that. But folks, I'm going to tell you, this is the life that we have chosen. It started back in the Garden of Eden when we rejected the gracious and kind God who wanted to show himself to us and have fellowship with us. As we've been looking at the story, it's reminded us how God has come alongside of us. And even in the midst of our rebellion, even in the midst of our heartache and hurt, that God still stands strong and he still gives us hope. He still gives us a way to go. He still gives us a direction in life. He still permeates our hearts with his life. And in every way, he still tries to communicate with us and reach into our hearts and our lives and our circumstances and reveal himself to us. That's what God is about. That's what his desire is. And even in the midst of our rebellion, God is working a plan. It's an incredible plan of redemption for those who turn their back on him. We don't deserve it. Obviously, we don't deserve it. I know who I am. You know who you are. We all understand what flawed creatures we are. But God's plan is still at work. It began in the Garden of Eden, and it continues to this day. And he called out a people to himself, Israel, and worked through a nation to show the world who he was. And out of that nation, he produced a Messiah, a Savior. And God himself came in the flesh. And he has spoken to us, not just through words, but he has spoken to us by his presence. As God's word says, by his Son in these last days. And so it brings us hope and it reminds us that we're on a journey of faith. And listen, it is a journey of faith. And it takes faith, I realize it. But I know this, that we are on God's timeline. We're on God's schedule. And God is working an upper plan here. And he speaks into mine and your life and calls us into that plan, working on the lower plan, that lower level of that. And so God is at work in the upper plan, invites us to join him in the lower plan of that, in redemption, in rescue. And at this moment in time, we are racing toward a finish line. As Eddie sang this morning, by the way, I told Eddie to. His blood pressure's in triple digits this morning, and I almost told him he couldn't come here today, but he wouldn't stay away. So he's going home. But we're racing toward a finish line. In some sense, it is already finished because of who God is. As we look in Revelation chapter 1, it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. And he sent and signified by his angel to his servant John. And I want to add to that in verse 4 it says, grace and peace to you from the one who is, who was, and who is coming, from the seven spirits before his throne, and from Jesus Christ. Well, that's a pretty good introduction. And a pretty good reminder about God being on our side. God caring enough about us to touch our lives and to reach into our circumstances and reveal himself, and telling us here through his word that I've got a plan for your life. And I want you to know that God the Father, God the Son, and Jesus Christ himself is at work and available and on the throne. Pretty good credentials to trust in, to hope in. And that God is up to something to bring us ultimately and fully and completely to himself. I'm glad this morning to report to you that God has decided not to leave us where we are. I'm glad to tell you this morning that this is not all there is, or we would be most hopeless and helpless. But God's plan is to take us, and he desires us so much that He's going to bring us into His very presence. And forevermore, we will be with the Lord. But this morning, I want to key in as we look at this opening of the book of Revelation this morning. I just want to key in on who He is. The one who calls us, the one who's working this plan, the one who has a great desire for us. I want us to understand who He is. I need the notes. It says, and from Jesus Christ, go back a minute. And what He did also. And from Jesus Christ, who He is. He's the faithful witness. He's the firstborn from the dead. And He's the ruler of the kings of the earth. In other words, He is our prophet, He is our priest, and He is our prince. He's our prophet because He is the faithful witness. He's the one who came and spoken words of life over us. And you know, as you read your New Testament, you found out very quickly that He was not welcome in all circles. Because truth matters, but truth also hurts. Truth can bring damage. Truth can bring conviction. But Christ stood and He shared the truth. He shared it in love. He shared it in grace. He shared it in mercy. But He shared it starkly. And He said things like, narrow is the way that leads to salvation, and few who go in. Broad is the gate that leads to destruction, and many there are who take that highway. He said things like, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. And we have folks in many religions who are not interested in that. And we hear this thought that there are many ways. But Christ came as a faithful witness, and He said, I'm telling you, there is one way. And there's only one way. But there is a way. He opened the door that had been slammed in our faces by our sin. And He loves us so much, and He cares so much, and He desires our presence so much that He would not leave us in our sin. But He opened the door. And the door is open to all who will come in. Jesus said, behold, I stand at that door and I knock. If you want to have a relationship, if you want to have fellowship, just come on in. Because He's made a way. He's opened the door. He's given us an invitation. He is the faithful witness. He has spoken words of life. He has spoken words of truth. And we have to decide, what are we going to do with it? He's not only our prophet, but He's our priest. Where it says He is the firstborn from the dead. We think about somebody like Lazarus, and we say, well, you know, but Lazarus came back to life, but Lazarus died again. Christ is the only one who, at first fruit, that He came, and by His own power He was resurrected, and He did not go back to the grave, but He ascended into heaven, and He will return in like manner as He went. He is our faithful priest. And because He is our priest, He has opened the door for us. He has made sacrifice for us. He has given Himself to us. And that's what Easter reminds us of. That I couldn't get there. That I couldn't change in and of myself. That there was no good thing in me. That I needed something, someone greater than myself. And so He has come. And He has sacrificed Himself. And He has become our great high priest. He has become our mediator. He has become the person that we can go to because He has come to us. And we can find forgiveness. We can find grace. We can find mercy to help in time of need. And then it reminds us who He is, and He is our Prince. The King James Version would say, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. But the King James Version would remind us that He is the prince of the kings of the earth. He is the one that we run to when we look around and we see governments falling apart. We see nations coming unglued. We see the world at war with itself. Strife and turmoil and hatred and hurt surrounds us. And it looks like it's winning. And it looks like it can never change. It'll always be the same. It'll always be just like this. But who He is our Prince. He is the ruler. He is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And He is still on His throne, and He is still in control. As John's writing this to the 7 churches, to the church itself. Domitian is on the throne, the Roman emperor, and he is demanding emperor worship. If you want to worship me as a god. I'm the emperor, I'm in charge. And if you don't, then there's persecution. There's famine in the land. You won't operate, you won't achieve, you won't progress. I will take everything from you unless you bow your knee to me. And it could seem very easily understood that the powers that be, that are, that were, will never change. That things will never get better. But John, writing this to the church, reminds them that Christ is still on the throne. That God is still in control. I know that mine in your life feels like it's out of control sometimes. Circumstances come, we go into a spiral. Things happen in our lives. Relationships are broken. People are separated. Heartaches. Things come in our lives for different circumstances and things that take place. And it can just seem like that's the way that life is going to be. And we ask ourselves, is this what life looks like? And we need to be reminded that there is ultimately someone in control of all this. Someone is at the helm. And there is a king who is in charge of all kings. The Bible reminds us that the heart of the king is in God's hands. And God allows these things to take place. But our faith and trust in Him, we know that there's an outcome that's coming. Because we name the name of Christ. Because we have faith. Because Christ lives in us. Because we're trusting Him. We know that life is different. That He is the authority that we look to. That changes everything. Going into northern India on a couple of occasions, you can't ultimately describe darkness. But you can go to a place like India, especially northern India, and you can discover real quick that there is an evil in this world. You can't see it in the spiritual, physical sense, otherwise in what that evil has done in the life of a people. That we saw things that people were living like animals. I mean, it's just horrendous what you can run into. And the way people are forced into living their lives because of the evil that's taken over. And I'll tell you folks, when you give yourself to evil, it will take over. We look at a place like the United States and we think, how come we don't see more of demonic possession in those kind of things? Well, it's around. These people give themselves to it, but you can go to a place like India and some other places, and you see where they have completely given themselves to evil. They produce these gods who are horrendous looking. They will scare the life out of you with many arms and heads and legs and snakes and teeth and blood. And I mean, it's just and you go into one of those places and you see people that's all they've ever known. And you see them that they are willing to believe anything. And the cattle roam the streets of major cities because they believe that It might be one of their relatives reincarnated. And you just get into all these crazy things, and they can be hungry, and you see them opening temples to monkeys and going and feeding the monkeys, and they running wild. It's just you just have to be there. And we're able to sit in the street and share the gospel, the good news, the hope that is in us. And you see people's coming to truth, and you see that truth changing them. And you see those who are obviously bound and so deep in darkness that they had lost hope a long time ago, and suddenly hear the truth, and that truth permeate their heart, and they receive Christ. And see the change that takes place in their lives. And I mean instantly. They'll grow in Christ. But the change is so drastic and permanent in their lives. And you can go back and you can intersect those same people. And suddenly those people who were so depressed, and we saw it in Russia, that we were handing out Bibles in Russia, and all they did, people were just coming by, and it was dull and drab, and they just had their heads down, and they wouldn't even look up at you, and they were just existing, and they were surviving in life. And to see them receive Christ, and suddenly see the light come on in their eyes, and the joy in their hearts, and the new life that they began to live, and the joy and the hope that was in them, and the change that took place. It's just incredible. But listen, that's the way it ought to be. It's either true or it's not. If it's not true, then we have no obligation. We can live whatever life we want. But if it is true, and I believe it's true because I know it's changed my heart. I've heard your testimonies, but I've been to some of those places that are deep and dark, where it shouldn't change anything. But it does, because you leave people in the same circumstances, but you've left them with the word of life. You've left them with faith. And their hearts are changed, and their lives are changed, and they begin to live again. They find life. And it's because of who He is. Everything I've told you today hinges on the resurrection. Christ was resurrected, or He wasn't. Christ is alive, or He's not. And here's what I think our problem is across the board, and I'm talking about inside the church and outside the church, is that we develop our own Christ. We take Jesus and we conform Him to our image or a world's image. We decide based on our feelings, our emotions, how He operates, what He looks like, what He does, whether He will or He won't. And we develop our own Christ for our own personal purposes, if you will. I think for a good part, as far as a church, that we don't even realize that most of the time. But I think that we take it and we place our emotions on Christ. And that's why we need to learn about Him. That's why we need to be involved in small groups. That's why we need to come and worship. That's why we need to be reading His Word. That's when we grow. And that's when we fully begin to understand who He is. And we can stop playing the tapes in our heads that I'm not good enough, I've done too much, I'm not worthy, I'm just a poor, helpless beggar. and stop playing those tapes that Christ will never accept me, that He'll never love me, that it's got to be somebody else, and I'll never attain, I'll never be good enough, never be smart enough, never be prominent enough. Or we take it the other direction and we'll say, that, well, I'm fine, I'm good. I've got this God. I've got my scale out, and I know who Leroy is, and I'm not like Leroy. I'm pretty decent. We compare ourselves to other people instead of looking at Christ and coming to an understanding that person, that faithful witness has spoken truth over us. He has defined who we are, that we're lost in our sin, that we have no avenue of escape apart from Him, that life is not worth living without Christ, because life just means a momentary gap in history and then it's all gone. And we make up our own Christ, and we conform Him to our image. John reminds us this morning that He is our prophet and our prince and our priest. That who He is makes a difference in my life, and it makes a difference in yours. And we have to be willing to come and place our life in His life. We have to be willing to come and accept Him and understand that He has made a way, that He has bought us back, that He has paid the price, that He has sacrificed His very self. That's what He thinks about you, and that's what He thinks about me, that He has given Himself. Because you are His desire. You are His desire. He's working a plan. It will come to consummation. We'll look at that in the next couple of weeks. Next week we'll look at the Christ of the Christ of the Kingdom. Next week we'll look at the Church of the Kingdom. The next week, the following week, we'll look at the consummation of the Kingdom as we finish up Revelation. But there's coming a day, and we're racing toward it, that we'll all stand. We'll stand in His presence. And all that matters is what we've done with Him. How destitute we are without Christ. Father, we thank You that we can come and